We are currently monitoring Tulsi Gabbard's confirmation hearing. Our colleague, our friend, someone who's been on this show for a number of years now, giving us her very unique insight as someone who serves the country, as someone who served the country in many different roles, and now is up to be potentially, if confirmed, the Director of National Intelligence.
This one is a little bit more contentious than we've seen in many of them.
We've seen hit pieces come out against Tulsi over and over and over, it feels like, in the last 4 or 5 days. You felt the pressure building. And one of the things that came out was a question of whether she had met with leaders of Hezbollah. And that ended up not making it into one of the hit pieces. So that probably could tell you something, which is, let's leak this information out there and then not put it in our article. So then we could just have the information out there without having to confirm it. And what I like about Tulsi is you never have to question where she stands or what she believes in terms of these questions. So here's a question from Susan Collins directly asking about this.
As you know, there has been speculation in the press that you met with Hezbollah, a terrorist organization affiliated with Iran. Have you ever knowingly met with any members, leaders, or affiliates of Hezbollah?
No, and it is an absurd accusation.
You can't be any clearer. That is the least politician answer I've ever heard. Because usually it'd be like, well, not to my knowledge. I would have not, come up with some sort of answer that included some loopholes if you needed it.
That's right.
But no, Tulsi came out there and said no, and it's an absurd accusation because they are making stuff up.
And from her opening statement, when she said, they're trying to say that I have these puppet masters, but then she says, the fact is what truly unsettles my political opponents is I refuse to be their puppet. And when you see these accusations, and as we've discussed off air for the past weeks since she was announced, but really these past 5 days as it's headed towards her confirmation hearing, the attacks that have come out in almost every major publication about her religion, about trying to still hit that meeting with Assad. And one thing that I think should be brought up as well is it shows the hypocrisy of the left and some Republicans that sit on this panel in the Intelligence Committee that are more of the old guard, as you could say, is that back in the late early 2000s, so like 2008, 2009, John Kerry was a sitting senator of the United States, and he traveled and had dinner with, and we have the photo, Bashar al-Assad, the president of Syria. He was still the brutal butcher of his people. This was around the time of the Arab Spring when these things happened and when the civil war broke out in Syria. The U.S. Senate confirmed him later Secretary of State for Barack Obama, 94-3. There was no, are you a puppet of Assad?
No uproar.
Are you secretly a terrorist? The same senators, many of these senators, Susan Collins, who's actually pretty aggressive towards Tulsi in this hearing, voted for John Kerry to be the Secretary of State, one of the highest positions in the United States. Just a couple people away in the line of succession from being president of the United States.
He was pretty close himself at one point.
Right. He lost the previous election, but
by a couple percent.
Still, you look at this and you say, that's the hypocrisy of the left. That proves the point where she says that what truly unsettles my political opponents is that I refuse to be their puppet. That's why we need someone like Tulsi Gabbard in it, Director of National Intelligence, to start to push back on the abuses and the failures of our intel community. But someone like John Kerry can get a pass from these senators. Yeah. I don't buy that.
This is someone that's actively has been serving for decades in many different roles. And trust me, there are times where maybe you were like, hey, she was on this broadcast every week, and then she would disappear. I wonder why. Maybe there were some important missions to be taken care of that were happening on behalf of the United States. I want you to hear from Tom Cotton.
I'm dismayed by the attacks on Ms. Gabbard's patriotism and her loyalty to our country. For instance, Hillary Clinton has smeared Ms. Gabbard, calling her an asset of a foreign nation. Let me remind everyone that Ms. Gabbard has served in our Army for more than 2 decades. She has multiple combat tours, and she still wears the uniform to this day. She has undergone 5 FBI background checks. I spent more than 2 hours last week reviewing the latest, putting eyes on more than 300 pages. It's clean as a whistle.
And you may wonder, and this is just a personal thing that you may know about her, is obviously if you look at Tulsi Gabbard, she has a gray streak in her hair. And a lot of people think that's a cool fashion statement, or maybe it's just how it was. It was not like that before she went to war, before she was serving during the War on Terror. When it got back, they believe that that is something that was caused from traumatic stress. And she has decided to wear that proudly. Okay? This is not somebody who we need to be questioning like this.
How important is it for the intelligence community to provide timely, relevant, factual, and objective intelligence to policymakers?
Senator, it is nothing less than a matter of our national security. Too often in the multitude of intelligence failures that our country has seen, that objective has not been met. Now, CIA Director Ratcliffe talked about in his testimony before this committee how the CIA's own internal metrics have shown that analytic objectivity has gone down within that organization. This is the very kind of thing that I would seek to address if confirmed as Director of National Intelligence, is ensuring that politics, biases, or personal views are checked at the door. I would lead by example by doing it myself, and ensuring that that intelligence analysis and reporting meets the objective that the President and Congress requires, which is no politics, no personal abuses, and making sure that that objectivity in a timely, relevant fashion is brought to the President so that we can get ahead of problems in ensuring our national security rather than being caught on our heels and being forced to respond to them.
Who in their right mind could disagree with that? Yet they are trying to go after her. Why? Because I think they're afraid of being forced to do their job objectively.
Yep.
That is terrifying when you think of our intelligence community fighting against someone when the own internal data show that their analytic objectivity is going down within the CIA. That is the opposite of what should happen in our intelligence community meant to keep us safe. The founders of this country would be mortified by hearing something like that, and then also seeing the attack from members of this bureaucratic deep state, the rumor, the slander that is being fed to every publication that is printing it with anonymous sources.
Yeah, printing or leaking.
With no real hard fact, not even getting statements to the contrary, journalistic malpractice. They would be completely mortified, the founders would, of what is taking place today.